Hello. I think we've got a connection. Hopefully we have better luck than last week. We dropped out early last week, and it was not a problem with the internet. It was a problem with the generator. But I think we're going to be okay this week. See, I'm off grid, and I have to depend on a generator to do these broadcasts. And last week, right at the start of the questions and answers, the generator crapped out. Okay, so less than a minute to go until the proper start time. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, so this week we're continuing on with the series based on the Mahānāma Sutta. And the first part of the sutta deals with the 5 indriya or faculties. So we're coming to the conclusion of that series, that subset, and today we're doing the last of the indriyas, which is Paññā or wisdom. And it is paired with saddha or faith, which we've already discussed. But I'll have a bit to say about their relationship. Paññā is not the same thing as knowledge, which would be avidya. Paññā is wisdom, or sometimes is translated as understanding. It's the faculty of mind that apprehends or intuits the truth. What's defined as wisdom in Buddhist context is understanding things according to reality, according to things as they actually are. This is related to the quality that's called yata bhuta nanadasana, knowledge and vision of things as they are, which is one of the critical steps leading to awakening. Wisdom can be defined as apprehending the Four Noble Truths. It can also be defined as apprehending the 3 characteristics. And that probably in a practical meditative context, that's probably the aspect of wisdom that is most relevant. It's seeing the arising dhammas as being dukkha, that is imperfect, unsatisfactory, suffering, prone to breaking up, and impermanent, anicca, the evanescent nature of reality, that nothing abides even for an instant. And probably most critical is to see emptiness, anatta, or not self, or sunya, emptiness, to see the insubstantiality and the voidness of things. Wisdom apprehending the voidness is probably the highest form, or the most subtle or profound form of wisdom, is the wisdom of apprehension of emptiness. When we perceive things otherwise than according to the three characteristics, if we perceive things as being inherently perfect or pleasurable, or if we perceive them as permanent or stable, or as substantial, of having a self-essence, then this is the opposite of wisdom, and it's called the vipalasas, or the hallucinations, literally the crooked view or perversion of view. And this is said to be Mara's trap. When we see things improperly, and we apprehend not with wisdom, then we're continually trapped in samsara. This is the ongoing process. So the work is always to try and see things according to reality as they actually are. And this is methodically or formally done in Vipassana practice, but it's something that we should be striving to encourage at all times, to foster the growth of wisdom that we're which in a sense, it's a kind of self-honesty, being honest and courageous enough to face the nature of reality without sugarcoating it or disguising it, to be face reality head on, which when it's first apprehended can be difficult or painful to see that your illusions have been stripped away and things are impermanent, suffering, and not self or empty. But in the end, it's extremely liberating. And we should strive to guide our behavior, our speech, and our thought patterns with wisdom, to be informed by wisdom, and not succumb to delusion or foolishness. Wisdom, as I said, I remarked at the outset, is as an indriya or a faculty, it's paired with saddha or faith, which means that the two have some opposite qualities, but they need to be developed together. They work together to foster the spiritual life. If one has a lot of faith but no wisdom, then this tends the person to be prone to magical thinking and superstition, empty ritualism. But if wisdom, and in the context of the indriyas, the wisdom here is particularly discriminating wisdom, which is the wisdom of being able to see this and that, the particular features of things, this kind of being able to discriminate between different types of the different khandhas, the different sense bases, and so on. And if one has discriminating wisdom to a high degree, but no, it's not informed by faith, then this can lead to a kind of a dry, cynical mind, the overly critical mind, which is not progressive. It doesn't lead forward in the path. It's cutting everything down without building up. And I think everybody's encountered people like this that have very critical minds, but they're very unhappy because they have nothing that they believe in or they're able to put their heart in. So this touches also on different aspects of wisdom. The Tibetans have a teaching of analyzing different types of wisdom, and one a pair of categories that they have is discriminating wisdom and the wisdom of equality, which is again is another balanced pair. The wisdom of equality, or the equalizing wisdom, is the wisdom that sees the fundamental similarity in dhammas, which again is penetrating the three characteristics. Every dhamma of any sort is going to be empty, impermanent, and dukkha. But the discriminating wisdom is able to particularize the different dhammas and to see this is a sense impression, this is a feeling, this is a thought form, and so on. And for a full understanding, both aspects are needed. There are some aspects in which dhammas differ and some aspects in which they are the same. Another pairing we could make with wisdom, another balancing factor would be wisdom balanced with compassion, Paññā and karuna. These two are said to be the supreme qualities of a Buddha. And they also need to be informed by one another. Compassion is the earnest wish that beings not suffer, and it can be a motivating force for action. But then if that action is not informed by wisdom, it can often do more harm than good. One needs to have wisdom to understand, first of all, is any action at this time possible that could be useful? And if so, what is the most skillful form of action? That wisdom without compassion is very cold-hearted and dry, and doesn't actually does not advance the person spiritually. The two have to be in balance. So wisdom needs to be balanced with faith and with compassion, and the different aspects of wisdom, the differentiating wisdom and the equalizing wisdom, need to be balanced. When wisdom is present, when it's strong, then it leads forward on the path. It leads to a deep renunciation and a movement out of samsara, a relinquishment. This is the sequence: yati bhutananadasana, knowledge and vision of things as they are, leading to nibbida, or disenchantment, leading to viraga, dispassion, leading to nirodha, cessation, and then vimutti, liberation. This is the particular sequence that leads out of samsara. And it comes, it is only possible with the development of wisdom, so that you can see things as they actually are, not as you wish them to be, or not as you theoretically think they are, And this is a tricky, perhaps this is another balancing factor we could mention, is wisdom and knowledge, because there's always the danger in the spiritual path of mistaking the recipe for the meal, or mistaking in the Zen story about the monk points out the moon to somebody, and the other person focuses on his finger instead of the moon. There's a danger of having a lot of knowledge, having theoretical constructs, having studied a lot, and having the framework memorized, that one can mistake actual reality for these mental constructs. Uh, the proper seeing with clear seeing, which is what Vipassana means, the proper clear seeing is seeing the actual reality as it actually is, not to impose theoretical constructs on it. Then you're dealing with mental formations, and that becomes, well, that can become an object of consciousness as well. But you should always be striving to experience the actual bedrock of reality, the actual experience as it is, and let the qualities like the three characteristics express themselves, not impose them on as an intellectual construct. That's not wisdom, that's an inappropriate application of knowledge. So I'll stop there and go to questions and answers, and hopefully we're not cut short like last week, but I don't think we will be. Okay, first question. In childhood, I focused intensely on a worldly hobby. It became an obsession that turned into a career. Left that career as it was not healthy. Should I continue to enjoy it as a hobby or ignore it? I can't answer that. It's a little bit too vague. I mean, it depends on the hobby. If it's actually something constructive and positive, if it's a learning experience, it may be worthwhile to carry it on as a hobby. It would depend. I guess the short answer would be depend on the actual nature of the activity. What's the difference between avidya and paññā? Well, avidya is ignorance, so it's definitely not. Vidya, in Pali is always a negative prefix. Vidya is knowledge, and avidya is not knowledge or ignorance. Avidya, what is avidya in the context of avidya paccaya sankhara? That's a phrase from the dependent origination. Ignorance translates as because of ignorance there arises formations, mental or volitional formations. This is the first two nadanas or stages in the dependent origination. And we could say that because of ignorance in past lives, because you didn't have a complete understanding, you took actions in the world that produce karma. Karma is produced out of ignorance. It's beings that arahants make no karma because they have no ignorance. You can think of sankharas, which meaning in this context it means volitional formations or karma producing formations, is like stumbling around in the dark and knocking things over. The darkness is the ignorance. So because of ignorance, formations, and then because of formations, that leads into the rebirth-seeking consciousness, and the whole process continues. Is samadhi a prerequisite for? This is a kind of complicated question. The basic teaching or the standard teaching is that samadhi and even jhana is required for sotapatti, for stream entry. But there is mention by the Buddha of a bare insight path, and that is explained by the teachers who carry on that tradition, like in the Burmese, some of the Burmese Vipassana masters, as being that at the last moments before entering the stream, there will be a momentary jhana. Because it's a principle in Abhidhamma as well, that there is no Maggaphala without jhana. and search, and then doing investigation. Samadhi is certainly, as a quality, is certainly necessary, whether it's to the degree of jhana or not, for effective vipassana can be done is the controversy. But samadhi is definitely required to whatever degree you can manage to develop your stillness, your samadhi, which we talked about last week. Then your insight will be better, will be easier and deeper. Okay, I gotta scroll up here. If one experienced flying in a lucid dream and it felt just as real as the waking life, so if one attained the psychic ability to fly, would he be able to fly with his physical human body, or would it be more like he would go into deep meditation to fly, similar to flying in lucid dreams? Well, flying in a lucid dream is definitely not the same as flying in the waking state with the physical body. The development of psychic powers is generally considered to be a sort of a waste of time, a side trip. It's not something one ought to be really vigorously pursuing. Psychic powers can arise with naturally with deep meditation, and there can be a subjective, in terms of flying or levitation, there can be a subjective feeling of weightlessness, of floating, that isn't actually a movement of the physical body. But I wouldn't rule out that some yogis have managed to actually physically levitate. Can wisdom arise without samadhi, i.e. for householders who do not meditate? There can be a degree of wisdom arise just from life experience. And that's certainly like a ordinary wisdom or mundane wisdom. Like we all develop that, even the thickest person, develops some wisdom just by the hard knocks of going through life. But it's not the deep wisdom of actually apprehending emptiness, for example. So I guess that should be considered too, that there's degrees of wisdom. There's common wisdom of just living your life sensibly, and there's the deep wisdom of apprehending emptiness. Can wisdom be likened to seeing and having knowledge that goes beyond the five senses? What I mean is that able to see other realms of existence, etc. No, that's not particularly wisdom. That's psychic power of the Deva Chaku, the divine eye. And that's not necessarily wisdom. One can have psychic powers without a great degree of wisdom, like we see the case of Devadatta, for example. I find it a struggle to keep Vipassana days when I'm at work. It's even harder on the weekend when I just want to relax. How can I practice Vipassana properly? So you find it difficult at work, you find it difficult on the weekend. Well, if it's difficult, it's more value to it. It is a really good practice for a lay person to take the Vipassana vows for on the moon days. I think it would be difficult, depending on your circumstances. It would be difficult that depending on your job, it might be difficult in terms of not eating after noon. Maybe you don't have your lunch break till afternoon. So there's different ways of approaching this. One would be to um, disregard the formal day, like, rather than do it on the full moon, do it on the first weekend after the full moon. You can do it that way. Um, Another way would be to give yourself a little bit of uh, latitude in interpretation of the rule, particularly the rule of eating. If your lunch break doesn't come till noon, then just determine that'll be your last meal of the day, even though it's afternoon. You could still consider yourself as having kept the spirit of the rule. Are there any particularly helpful practice you advise lay people to take up for Vasa? Um, well, we just spoke about taking Upasana vows. I think for a layperson who's got the time and the flexibility in their schedule, if they can uh, take Upasana vows for a day or even for longer periods, that's very helpful. But even just to determine to say, if you're meditating already once a day, then make a determination to meditate twice a day. Uh, Things like that, to have make a determination and stick to it. Be careful with this is called a practice aditan, making a determination and then following it. But one should be careful with that, not to make an aditan lightly, because it sets you back if you make a determination and then break it. So only make a determination that you are sure you'll be able to keep. Would it be possible to gain jhana when you were too young to remember, or near-death experience at a very young age? Yes, yeah. Young children often have spontaneous spiritual experiences. The Buddha himself, he recounts having entered jhana as a young boy under the rose apple tree, watching his father plowing the field. So these things are possible. I think children have not yet, very young children have not yet uh, complicated their minds as much as later. That they're coming out as very pure state, very clean slate, and it's possible they can have quite profound spiritual experiences, and not be able to integrate them or understand them, and can even be forgotten in later life. Regarding Vipassana, recently I heard for the first time about Kalapas as the reality of Namarupa. Is this Orthodox Theravada teaching? Well, it's in the Theravada tradition. It's not from the original text. The atomic theory with Kalapas comes from Abhidhamma commentaries. So it's a development of the later, but it's in the main line of the tradition. So whether you count that as orthodox or not would depend on your definition. If we are conditioned to know an 8-sided red metal piece to be a stop sign, for example, that we stop at, is there any way to unsee this? Not really. You can't. It's not. It's not really. Not really accessible to us to volitionally turn off the process of sanya. We can experience a moment without sanya sometimes. When a good example is when you first wake up in the morning, and this is an experience that you may have had if you're traveling and you wake up in a strange room, somebody's house you're visiting, or a motel, hotel, or you wake up in a strange place, and there's it's kind of dark, but not totally dark in the room. It's like half light, and for a moment you just see shapes. If you're relaxed enough, there may be this kind of moment when you're just perceiving shapes, but not objects. You're not able to see. That's a nightstand. That's a lamp. That's a door. You just see rectangular and circular shapes in the dark, and usually that's only a few moments. But that would be consciousness without sanya. But I don't think it's really possible to volitionally turn off that sanya of seeing a red rectangle with STOP on it as a stop sign. Bhante, some monks say it's bad karma to be reborn as a woman. Is this true? I don't know. I don't know if I'd say that. I mean, it's definitely karmically determined what your birth state is. That's something maybe that I had actually planned to mention in the main talk about wisdom, but I passed the moment by and didn't mention it. It's another teaching from Tibetan Buddhism in the pairing of wisdom and compassion, that wisdom is considered female, the feminine energy, and compassion is male or masculine energy. I think that's a very profound and interesting teaching, and it goes not least because it sort of goes against the cultural bias in the West. But wisdom is seen as female. I was thinking of that when I chose the thumbnail for today's talk, which is a representation of the High Priestess tarot card, which is a symbol of wisdom. The Greeks also personified wisdom as Sophia. The goddess of wisdom was Sophia. So it's not what I could say. The unfortunate karma of being a woman is that there are some forms of suffering that are peculiar to women that men don't experience, such as menstruation and childbirth. So if you want to consider that as being an unfortunate or bad karma, then that would depend on how much stock you put in those forms of suffering. Certainly men don't have those particular forms of suffering. What does it mean to reveal someone's mind by means of nimitta? Ida bante kacha nimitta adasati evampeti mano etampeti mano etipi ichitanti. So here one sees this by way of nimitta, that this is the mind. This is your mind. This is your consciousness. A nimitta of the mind, like a vision or an image. It doesn't necessarily. It's usually implied to be an image or like a visual perception, but it could be the other sense bases as well, such as an auditory sound, or even a smell that can arise. Something that doesn't arise from outside, not really a sense impression, but like a vision or an internally generated form. So if one has the psychic power of penetrating other people's minds, then their thought occurs in your mind as a nimitta. Bhante, can one reach Vimutti by only understanding one of the three characteristics? Oh, well, Vimutti will open the door to all three, but it actually, there is teaching given in some detail in the Visuddhimagga about the three gateways to liberation. That any one of the three characteristics penetrated in depth becomes a gateway to liberation, opens the door to Vimutti. And it's implied that actually everybody who attains to uh, stream entry or at one of the other stages had to go through one of those gateways. You know? So someone who attains through the quality of dukkha is said to be a body witness, because dukkha is most evident in the body. Going through the gateway of impermanence is said to be the signless liberation, the animata liberation. And through the gateway of not self is the void liberation. Next question. What do you think about the concept nature of mind? Could this properly be used to describe wisdom? I'm not sure. I'm not sure what you mean by that question. Maybe you could clarify. I don't know what you mean by what context you're using nature of mind. Is there anything to lunar cycles, though? It seems incredible that the Buddha's birth, enlightenment, and death all occurred by chance during full moons. Well, it is a very strong tradition in India, pre-Buddhist, to have the spiritual life centered around the moon cycles. It's one way of being in harmony with the natural cycles, is to be present with the moon. It's also symbolic of the mind, the changing face of the moon. It's like the shifting change of the mind. So I mean, if you want to do practice plus the according to the moons, that is that's a very good thing to do. But I think you have to, as I mentioned in the previous questionnaire, you have to have some flexibility of not sticking rigidly to form, but using form as a vehicle for liberation. Follow up to my earlier question, the Buddha said avijja paccaya sankhara, and I thought it meant an absence of wisdom, but it seems like an absence of difference. Well, it's both. Avijja is literally it's an absence of knowledge, but it really implies an absence of wisdom as well, complete emptiness of or darkness of not seeing. So acting without that knowledge or that wisdom, just makes for bad results. In the Anapanasati Sutta, the instruction is breathing in long. He discerns I am breathing in long. Does this mean when breathing in long, or is it instruction to breathe in long on purpose? No, there are some different takes on this, but I take it to mean just knowing when the breath is long or short, not controlling the breath. My experience with Anapanasati is that one should not manipulate the breath. One should just let the body breathe naturally. Is it true that awakened Buddha was still disgusted by other people's defilements? No, he would not be disgust. He would not feel disgust. That would be a defilement. He wouldn't approve of their defilements, but he doesn't have an emotional reaction to it. Could wisdom be defined as discovering the true nature of mind? That could certainly be a major aspect of wisdom. Understanding that the true nature of mind would be a very important opening of wisdom. Okay, so we got through quite a few. questions today, and the internet held up and the generator is still running, so everything worked this week. Let's see, but maybe here's one more question. Is karma amplified during Oposa days? The Buddha mentions earthly kings' pleasures are not a 16th of heavenly pleasures, so observe Uposada. No, I don't think that's really the meaning of that passage. It's just that the pleasures of the devas are so much beyond our own experience, and keeping the opposite vows is one way of reaching the deva realms. I'm somewhat confused now. Are Vidya and Paññā distinct? Yeah, they are, and I mentioned that Vidya is knowledge, and Paññā is wisdom. So Vidya is you know having a structure that a mental structure to organize reality, but Paññā is deeper, is more profound, is understanding reality as it is directly or intuitively. So starting next week, we're moving into the second half of the sutta, which is dealing with specific meditation practices that the Buddha recommended to the layman Mahānāma. And if anyone wants to look up the sutta, it's in Gutra 11. It's the 11th sutta in the Book of 11s in the Gutra Nikaya. Okay, thank you all, and I'll tune in next week.